November 16, 1957, Plainfield, Wisconsin. A small rural town where everyone knows each other is about to discover that their quietest neighbor was hiding the darkest secrets in American criminal history. Today we're going to learn about the story of Ed Gein, the man who inspired Norman Bates from Psycho, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs. But the reality is even more disturbing than any fiction. Edward Theodore Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse, Wisconsin. He was the second son of George and Augusta Gein, and from the beginning his life was marked by isolation and repression. George Gein was an alcoholic and violent, but the real control of the house was in Augusta's hands, a religious fanatic woman, follower of the old Lutheran tradition. For her, the world was corrupted by sin, and women were instruments of the devil. Augusta forbade her sons from having friends. Ed only left the house to go to school, and when he returned, he was forced to do chores on the farm. She read the Bible to the boys every day, always choosing passages about death, murder, and divine retribution. And Ed developed an obsessive relationship with his mother. At 12 years old, Augusta caught him masturbating in the bathtub. She grabbed his genitals and said, "This is the curse of man." She demanded that her sons remain virgins, claiming that desire would lead them to eternal damnation. In 1915, Augusta moved the family to an isolated farm near Plainfield. There, Ed grew up in total seclusion. At school, he was shy, had speech problems, and was the target of mockery. But at home, Augusta controlled him completely. In 1940, George Gein died at 66 from heart failure. Augusta showed little emotion. For her, it was just the consequence of her husband's weakness and vices. With their father dead, Ed and his older brother Henry were completely under Augusta's control. But Henry was different. He questioned his mother. He started dating a divorced woman and planned to leave home. And then on May 16, 1944, something happened. Ed and Henry were burning vegetation on the property when the fire got out of control. At the end of the day, Ed reported that his brother had disappeared. When the search team arrived, Ed led the firefighters directly to Henry's body. He was lying face down with no burns. The official cause of death was listed as asphyxiation and heart failure, but witnesses reported that Henry had contusions on his head. No investigation was conducted, no autopsy was performed. The case was filed as an accident, but to this day many believe that Ed killed his own brother. With Henry dead, Ed was alone with Augusta. He devoted himself completely to caring for her. But in 1945, Augusta suffered a stroke, and in December of the same year, she passed away at 67. Ed was 39 years old. And for the first time in his life, he was completely alone. After Augusta's death, Ed sealed off the room she used most. Her bedroom, the living room, the upper floor. He preserved everything exactly as it was, like a shrine. Meanwhile, the rest of the house deteriorated. Ed lived in a single room near the kitchen, surrounded by dirt and disorder, but within that chaos, something even more sinister was happening. Ed began reading magazines about macabre adventures, cannibalism, Nazi atrocities. He became obsessed with the story of Ilse Koch, the bitch of Buchenwald who made lampshades from human skin. And then Ed started visiting the local cemetery. At night, he would dig up the bodies of recently buried women who resembled his mother. He would take the bodies home and use their skin to make clothes. Ed later confessed that he visited about 40 graves. In 30 of them, he said he left confused and returned home empty-handed, but in the others, he took the bodies. Ed couldn't accept his mother's death, and in his twisted mind, he believed he could rebuild her, or even transform himself into her. For years, Ed lived in this macabre routine. To the residents of Plainfield, he was just a weird but harmless man. He did odd jobs, babysat children, Nobody suspected. Until December 8, 1954, when Mary Hogan disappeared. Mary was 51 years old and owned a local tavern. When police arrived, they found blood on the floor and the cash register stolen, but no body was found. The case remained unsolved. 3 years later, on November 16, 1957, it happened again. Bernice Worden, 58, owner of a hardware store, disappeared. Her son, Frank Worden, was a deputy sheriff. He entered the store and saw the open cash register and a trail of blood. Frank remembered that Ed Gein had been at the store the night before and said he would return the next morning to buy antifreeze. The last receipt written by Bernice was for a gallon of antifreeze. That same night, police went to Ed Gein's farm, and what they found changed the course of American criminal history forever. When officers entered Ed Gein's farm shed, they found Bernice Worden's body. She was decapitated, gutted, hanging upside down like a deer. She had been killed with a .22 caliber rifle shot. But this was just the beginning. Inside the house, police made discoveries that to this day are difficult to describe. They found masks made from human skin, bowls made from human skulls, chairs upholstered with human skin, lampshades covered with human skin, a vest made from skin and female organs, the woman's suit that Ed wore to become his mother, human organs preserved in jars, Mary Hogan's skull in a box. Police found remains of at least 15 different women in Ed Gein's house. Ed was arrested immediately. During interrogation, he confessed to killing Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden. He said he chose them because they resembled his mother. In 1958, Ed Gein was psychologically evaluated. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and deemed mentally incompetent to stand trial. He was committed to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane in Waupun, Wisconsin. 10 years later, in 1968, Ed was finally tried. He was found guilty of first-degree murder of Bernice Worden, but was declared insane at the time of the crime. Ed Gein spent the rest of his life in psychiatric institutions. He died on July 26, 1984, at 77 from complications of lung cancer. But Ed Gein's story didn't end with his death. His crimes inspired some of the most iconic characters in horror cinema. Norman Bates from Psycho 1960, the obsessive relationship with his mother. Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974, the masks made from human skin. Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs 1991, the suit made from skin. And in 2025, Netflix released Monster, the Ed Gein story, reigniting interest in the case. Ed Gein's story shows us how extreme isolation, repression, and psychological abuse can create real monsters. Augusta Gein believed she was protecting her son from sin, but in reality, she was creating one of the most disturbing criminals in American history. Ed Gein was never a serial killer in the traditional sense. He officially killed only 2 people. But his crimes of grave desecration and the macabre objects he created left a permanent mark on popular culture. The small town of Plainfield was never the same again, and the name Ed Gein became synonymous with horror. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. And tell me in the comments, did you already know Ed Gein's story? What did you think of the case? Until the next case.